Prospector XL, in my eyes, is one of the premier overland vehicles. Sure, it has its pros and cons, strengths and weaknesses, but generally it's hard to beat in terms of specs and performance. Also, one of my favorite things is that it comes set and ready as a turnkey overland rig straight from the dealership, which makes it super compelling to me. Today we're going to talk about what the heck this thing is, what makes it different from a regular Ram pickup, and if you can save on the premium pricing and just build one on your own. This is my AEV Prospector XL. Okay, so who is AEV? AEV is short for American Expedition Vehicles, and it was founded on a dream by the owner Dave Harrington. Harrington? I never really knew exactly how to pronounce his name. Dave, I'm sorry. But it was founded by Dave, also known as AEV Dave. It all started when he stretched his TJ Wrangler back in, 1997 or something, so that it would handle better on the highway. And directly from the AEV website, since AEV has become the world's premier supplier of OE quality, performance-driven aftermarket parts and accessories for vehicles geared specifically to off-road recreational driving and overland adventure travel. One of the things that sets them apart from, say, other upfitters is that they have a direct relationship with these OE manufacturers like Ram and Jeep, and they offer products and upfitting sold directly through the dealership. There's a podcast out there where Dave is being interviewed by Scott Brady and Matt Scott over at Overland Journal. I think it's the Overland Journal podcast. And they interviewed Dave, and I'd highly recommend you go check it out if you have any interest in AEV stuff. It's probably been one of the best ways that I can kind of get inside Dave's head in terms of like what his goals and motivations were for AEV and kind of like what they're doing. Anyway, I can link to it down in the show notes. Let me start by saying that I paid for my truck. I have no vested interest in promoting AEV. I happen to really like them. I've been really impressed with their products, really impressed with their service. I've been really happy with the truck overall. I've had a couple of Ram related issues that had nothing to do with AEV, but nobody's paying me to say this, and these are strictly my opinions. As you can imagine, they have vehicles or upfitting projects largely centered around Jeep or Ram vehicles. AEV first came on my radar specifically because of the AEV Ram Prospector XL. Although I did realize early on that AEV actually was probably on many of our radars because of the Brute. You guys remember the Brute? Some may argue that the Jeep Gladiator was inspired by the Brute. The Brute was the earliest Jeep pickup truck. AEV made it. They were famous for it. I think they even did a Hemi swap, or maybe that was an option on them. Anyway, you might have seen those floating around, before, maybe in the early 2000s or mid 2000s. I don't know. I think that's maybe when they came out. They do have a Chevy product, or they have more than this, but they do have a Chevy product for the Colorado called the Bison, which is kind of like a smaller truck version of this, where they do, fender cuts, larger fender flares, and enable that smaller pickup to run a 35-inch tire. However, in the last several months, I know they've been working on this for a couple of years, but they have unveiled publicly a product lineup and working with relationship with GMC. And one of the newest iterations of that relationship is the GMC AT4X AEV edition. With that pickup comes front bumper, maybe a rear bumper. I don't know all the details, you could look into it, but talking with AEV, that was like a super huge deal for them to kind of expand into that product line. And with the new Colorados that have come out, I think they've revamped all that. I think you can get an AEV bumper directly from the factory, front and rear. Don't quote me on that, but there's a lot of other things that they've got cooking. But to me, the most recognizable aspect of AEV is the work that they've done with the Jeep and of course the Prospector XL. I have known about the Prospector XL. It's been on my radar for several years now, and it was one of those things where, like, I think back in 2017, 2018, I was looking at that going, wow, that's something else. Okay, so in terms of the Ram offering, there are basically two different options when it comes to AEV upfitting vehicles. You've got the Prospector and you've got the Prospector XL. So what's the difference between the two? Well, basically the Prospector is the Prospector XL without the 40-inch tire kit. Still has the same, I think it has the same suspension, but it still has a 3-inch lift with a dual sport suspension. It has, you know, the front bumper, the rear bumper. You can do snorkel options, stuff like that. Snorkels are options, but you don't have the fender cut. You don't have basically all of the components that come with making the 40-inch tire kit work. And of course, it's got a smaller price tag. Okay, so where do we start? To begin, a Prospector XL starts with the base truck, right? So you can go get, and you can build a Prospector XL on, you can't build it on a 1500, but you can build it on a Power Wagon, 2500 Power Wagon. Most people generally wouldn't recommend that because it's got the Hemi V8. A lot of people run that, but running the 40-inch tires and the increased stress that comes with running that much rotational weight, I guess, a lot of people would just recommend going with the diesel. But you just start out basically with a 2500, right? So you can take a baseline 2500 if you want to keep your costs down and do an XL, Prospector XL kit on that. I have a Laramie. I wanted something that was a little fancy. And so this is an AEV Ram 2500 Laramie. And as far as options go, I think I have pretty much all the options available. I've got adaptive cruise control. I've got a really great stereo system, whatever the upgraded stereo system is, with the subwoofer under the back seat. I had the same system in my white truck, my last one, if you remember that one. Obviously leather interior, it's really nice inside. I've got heated and ventilated seats, heated steering wheel. I've got the Ram air suspension, which is basically airbags in the back. You can lower the bed and also like kind of compensate for towing and stuff like that. It's kind of nice. I did have one airbag failure already, which was frustrating. I guess it's kind of part of the gig. There's one thing that I didn't have that I don't know that I necessarily regret it, but it's the larger screen. Kind of the story with this truck is that I actually had one of these ordered, built out the way I wanted it to be. I had the larger screen on the one that I built out, but then Jackson called me before that one came in. That one wasn't gonna come in for a few months, and he said, hey, I got this one. We'll go over who Jackson is in a minute. Has pretty much all the things that you wanted, but it doesn't have the larger screen. And I went ahead and took delivery of this after I talked to a buddy of mine, Shavas, who said, you know, that larger screen's really nice. It's cool to have, but the lower half is basically climate controls. It's not necessarily a usable screen. To me, I actually like the fact that I've got actual buttons for all my climate controls and stuff down below the screen. I kind of would rather have that. The screen's plenty big enough for me. But in terms of, you know, resell later on, right? Maybe that'll bite me in the butt. But at the end of the day, I'm happy with what I have. I did get the off-roading kit, you know, the one that's got the limited slip rear differential. I don't have lockers or anything like that. And it also, I think it's called the Snow Group or whatever, the one that comes with the lights on the roof. Thought that looked cool. For starters, in terms of everything a Prospector XL comes with and the different options, you can get it all on AEV's website, so don't take my word as gospel. And please, if I get anything wrong and you feel so inclined, correct me in the comments. Now, I don't know exactly what entailed conceptualizing the Prospector XL, but to me, I would think you would probably start with, how can I run a larger tire? How can I run, what's the largest tire I could run? And I'm not a tire guy, I'm not in the tire industry, but to my knowledge, the 40-inch tire is one of the largest kind of standardly available tires out there. And when I say standardly available, they're actually, the last couple of years, they've kind of been hard to come by. But a 40-inch tire is a pretty standard, I wouldn't even say it's a standard size, but it's a readily available tire size. And you know, in terms of off-roading or, you know, sort of off-road comfort, you want as much sidewall as you can. So they designed this around the idea of having a 40-inch tire on a 17-inch rim, and you can see the sidewalls are enormous. So if I've got a Ram pickup truck, how am I going to run a 40-inch tire? Well, one of the ways you can do it is just give it a monster frickin' lift. But when you give it a monster lift, what that's going to do is it's going to increase the center of gravity. So I want to run the largest tire possible, and I want to keep the center of gravity as low as possible. And so what you're going to do is you're going to cut the fenders. You're going to cut the fenders, and actually, I believe, don't quote me on this, they may not do this anymore, but I know that they did on the 4th gen Rams, but there could be on this, again, check with AEV, but they move the front axle forward just enough to be able to cut the fenders and then run a 40-inch tire and clear. So obviously part of what they're trying to accomplish is run a 40-inch tire, but run it in a scenario where they're going to be able to clear the fenders in any sort of obstacle or scenario. I think technically you could probably run a 42-inch tire on here without getting into too much trouble. I know of a guy that's doing it, but he upgraded some of the infrastructure components, maybe even new axles. I don't know for sure, but running a 40-inch tire in this setup is totally fine and totally doable, right? They're doing it all day long. But certainly there are other complications that come with that. Like, for instance, there are, I believe, some things that need to be relocated in the front, right, in order to clear the 40-inch tire. I think the back is totally fine. And if you know different on that too, please let me know in comments. So how do you run a 40-inch tire? Well, you got to cut the fenders and you got to add a fender flare, right? So the fender flares on the AEV Prospector XL, to me, are the most, it's kind of the trademark look. It's a very imposing, it's got a very imposing stature. And I'm no mechanic and I have not done this conversion myself, but from what I understand, the conversion in terms of running the fender flares and all the work that goes into it, I think somebody told me it's about 10 hours of labor per corner, or maybe it averages that and maybe it's more up here. I don't know for sure. If you've ever done this conversion and you happen to know how long it actually takes, let us know in the comments below, because I'm for one, am curious on maybe an updated estimate of that, or maybe some clarification or correction if my memory isn't serving me correctly, which it often doesn't. But once you cut the fenders, obviously you've got bare metal, you've got to put something on there that's going to prevent rust, and then you got to put the fenders on. The inside of the fenders are then finished off with an OE spec molded fender liner. The entire kit and caboodle looks really polished. Interestingly enough, this thing only has a 3-inch lift. The suspension kit that comes with the Prospector XL is called the AEV Dual Sport Suspension. They call it dual sport suspension because the concept behind the suspension is to have dual purposes. It should perform amazing off-road and it should also perform amazing on-road. The ride quality on this thing is really amazing, and it's really impressive considering it's got 40-inch tires and it's just so big. It drives really, really well. Interestingly, one day I was at the grocery store and I parked next to a stock 2500. It was a Ram 2500, and I didn't have a camper on it at the time, and the bed rails on my truck, they were higher up, taller than the stock 2500, but not much. But if you have a 3-inch lift and you're running a 40-inch tire, let's say the stock truck came with 33s, well, the difference between 33 and 40 is obviously 7. You're gonna take that 7 and cut it in half. And so your increased ground clearance from the tires is going to be about 3.5 inches. Now, obviously, I'm not taking into consideration the fact that the 40-inch tires are gonna measure an actual like 40 inches. Usually they measure 39, 39 and a half or whatever, obviously depending on the brand. But from the tires alone, you're gonna get 3+ inches of extra ground clearance. And so the combination of the 3-inch lift and the larger tires, it gives you more ground clearance, keeping the center of gravity as low as possible. So it's really interesting because a lot of people, when they look at the truck, they go, man, this thing's so big. But then when you put it next to, like I said, a stock 2500, a stock 2500 is also really big. So this thing is wider, it is a little bigger, but it's not as much bigger as you might think. For shocks, they're using a huge Bilstein, however you say it, 8100 with remote reservoirs. I was just looking to see if it had remote reservoirs on the front and back. The front are remote reservoirs in terms of they're mounted elsewhere. The back has integrated remote reservoirs. They're mounted on the actual shock body itself. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, I think they're running the factory coils. Okay, so let's talk about the bumpers. The front bumper is a stamped steel bumper. It's not just a bunch of pieces that they're welding together like you see in a lot of aftermarket bumpers. The podcast that I referenced earlier, Dave, he goes into the manufacturing process of making these front bumpers. And it's really interesting because after I listened to that podcast, like my regard for AEV was already high, but when I heard like all of the things that go into like being able to manufacture at this level and to be able to manufacture at OE quality, to where, you know, these manufacturers are willing to like kind of put their stamp of approval on it, if you will. It's good stuff. You got to go check it out. Additionally, the finishing process on here, it's not just like powder coated, right? The problem with powder coating that I've had in steel bumpers, and this is kind of the common and the standard, is that, at least in my experience, after a few years, you get chips on them. You know, it blemishes the finish. You end up getting moisture in there and you end up getting rust. And then you have to go take the bumper off, get it stripped down and redone. Again, not the end of the world. I know it comes with the territory, but to my knowledge and my understanding, you're not gonna have that issue with this bumper. Dave goes into that in the podcast that I referenced. I'd check that out if you're interested. And of course, the way the bumper looks, I mean, it's a great looking bumper. The front bumper is winch ready, it has rated recovery points, and it retains the factory proximity sensors and the fog lights. Of course, I upgraded my fog lights to a product from CJC that's running a Baja light, and they've got the little plastic thing. I can link to that in the show notes as well. I highly recommend that upgrade, by the way. And of course, there are plenty of add-ons like a bolt-on brush guard and lights. Down underneath, there's also a diesel intercooler shroud to protect the intercooler in case, you know, you hit something. You don't want to hit the intercooler with a rock. All right. I was running out of daylight, so anyway, it's the next day. Let's talk about this rear bumper. So the rear bumper, I think, is molded plastic. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it looks really good and it's super functional. It has treaded step areas, integrated trailer connections, and really clean aesthetics. I mean, it looks really good. But most importantly, the underside is protected by this steel tubing, this bar work as the Australians like to call it. And of course, you've got rated recovery points. Also of note is the retention of the factory proximity sensors, and of course, the trailer hitch. And in terms of this bar work, I can tell you, I have actually come down with the full weight of the back of the vehicle on these bars off of a really nasty ledge like 48 hours into owning this thing. I mean, they worked, they did their job. And I've got the dents to prove it. I touched it up though. Other things the Prospector XL kit comes with is hydraulic steering assist, which helps the power steering system move these 40-inch tires. These AEV 17 by 10-inch Catla wheels. Their AEV Pro Cow module, which is actually used to recalibrate the system so that it knows it's running 40-inch tires and your speedometer and mileage and all that other stuff doesn't get thrown off. By the way, as a quick note, the system comes calibrated already, so you don't have to fuss with that. But in case something gets thrown off or you have to reset something, you've got the ability to do that. And it also comes with AEV and Prospector XL branding all around, which tells people what this thing actually is. And it comes with some other nice touches like the gauge cluster branding, seat headrest branding, the neat sticker on the windshield, and a unique build plaque you can use to flex on all your overland buddies that this is the real deal. Honestly, one of my favorite things about this vehicle is the fact that it came like turnkey, built ready. I mean, like it was ready to go. Actually, like I said earlier, within 48 hours of me even buying this thing, I was on a pretty nasty trail in, where was I? I was in, I guess, southern or central Utah or something like that. It was a track called the Devil's Racetrack. It was nastier than I wanted to be on, but the truck handled just fine. The thing is, when we're building overland rigs, there's so much that goes into it. You know, you can buy a stock 4Runner, and stock, I mean, it's pretty capable. You put a good set of tires on it. You're limited on some of the things you can do because of ground clearance, but at the end of the day, like you're going, I want to lift. Then once you do a lift, you want to run larger tires. Larger tires run into, you know, needing to do something on the bumper, maybe for increased clearance or added protection. Then you get into the realm of skid plates and all these other things that kind of start really eating into, gee, this $40,000 or $50,000 vehicle I just bought, all of a sudden I've spent $20,000 on all of these other things. I'm not saying 70 grand will get you one of these, although maybe someday you can get a used one for 70 grand. But what I am saying is that for me, the ability to get into something turnkey and not have to like wonder about or research all of the different componentry that I need to get into in order to make something what I want it to be, like this was turnkey. I didn't have to fuss with any of that stuff. That was a huge selling point for me. It's also a huge selling point for the Bronco, which we're going to talk about in another video. I know I keep teasing it, but that's special for you. Obviously, the list of pros is a long list. You don't really have to do anything once you drive this thing off the lot except for add your camping gear. There's other nice things that you can add, but otherwise, I mean, it's like I said a second ago, it's ready to go. But that brings me to the cons. The first con is the price. And I say that this is a con mainly because it is a higher barrier of entry. If you're wanting to get into something like this and you don't have the money to buy something like this, well, I mean, it is what it is, right? Now, I'm not saying that it's not worth the money that this thing costs. What I am saying is that if you want to buy something like this and you don't have the money to spend, I mean, obviously that can be a con. It's going to get in your way. Also, I don't know how well you can hear this. I bet the noise is in the background, but I'm recording today. Anyway, I don't have a good zoom lens on this camera, but there is a big giant tractor clearing those piles over there. So if you can hear the noise, sorry about that. But to me, the biggest con of this thing is frankly, the size. When I lived out west and or when I have traveled out west with this, the size has been generally less of an issue, but on a lot of the trails that I've been on out east, which I admit has not been a lot, I feel like I keep ending up on these Jeep trails somehow. You gotta be a little more selective with the types of trails you take when you have a truck like this. And the last con that I have is the fact that this truck it's expensive enough and it's nice enough to where I actually care about the scratches. And I hate that I care about the scratches. I hate that I care about it because it really limits you in what you are willing and able to do in terms of backcountry exploration travel. And my 4Runner, I didn't care. And my 4Runner was like, another nick, another scratch. Of course, it helped that it was silver and you couldn't see anything anyway. This is the wrong color for overland travel. I do not recommend dark colors. But at the end of the day, this is what I ended up with, and if I get scratches on it, it kills me. So I know there's solutions for that. I looked into PPF, and I got some quotes for that, and it's ridiculously expensive. It's more than I'm willing to spend, but there's some other things out there that I'm looking at too. But anyway, it's one more thing to think about and consider. Okay, so let's talk about warranty issues. This was something that I wasn't really sure going into it in how it worked, but I was really curious. When you buy a brand new AEV Prospector XL, everything's covered under warranty, right? All of the componentry that comes from AEV and the truck itself, it's all covered under warranty, under the regular factory warranty. Obviously the AEV parts aren't gonna be replaced by RAM if something fails there. That's covered under an AEV warranty. But what I'm saying is that, if you have a problem with anything that's related to AEV parts, it's not gonna void your warranty. That's what I'm saying. With that said, it's a little tricky dealing with this. And the reason why I tell you this is I had an experience where I had something going on with the front drive shaft. I take it into my local dealer, there's a clicking noise in 4 low under certain conditions, and my local dealer's like, well, of course you're having a problem. This is a heavily modified vehicle. And I can tell you right now, it's not going to be covered under warranty. And I'm like, whoa, 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 cool your shorts, cool your jets, eat my shorts. I don't know what the saying is, but at the end of the day, I'm like, all right, something's wrong here. Let me figure this out. So obviously I leave the dealership with my vehicle and I call AEV and I'm trying to figure out like, what am I gonna do in order to solve this problem? Obviously through this issue, I'm working with AEV's customer service, and basically their recommendation was to take it to another dealership and see if I can have a better experience. They recommended taking it to an AEV certified dealer, which there was one about an hour away from our house, which was inconvenient because my local dealer is like 10 minutes, but it is what it is, right? So I schedule an appointment, I go out there, I talk to them, and they were great. They were super helpful. They weren't as knowledgeable as I would have hoped, but that's always hit or miss with dealerships, I found, in terms of service departments. But at the end of the day, we were able to solve the problem and we were able to move on. If you are fortunate enough to buy from an AEV certified dealer who has experience with these vehicles, like I mentioned Jackson Ellis, is that his last name? Jackson, sorry if I don't have your last name right, but Jackson out of Glendale Dodge in California, in Glendale, California. For instance, if you buy with him, which I highly recommend that you do, and you have an issue and you're local there, he's going to take care of you. Their dealership and their service department and their service mechanics and representatives are very knowledgeable. They were great. I've had one issue when I was out west with one of the airbag failures. I took it in, zip, zap, zop. They took care of me like really fast, especially considering they didn't have any of those things. They didn't have that thing in stock. It was amazing. I had a great experience there. So it's just something to think about and consider. If you're out in the middle of nowhere and you want one of these things and you don't have a local dealer that's going to be able to take care of you, like I said, it's just something to think about. Okay, so where can you buy one of these AEV Prospector XLs if you wanted to buy one new? Like I said a second ago, you need to find an AEV certified dealer. I highly recommend Jackson over Glendale Dodge, but there's other AEV certified dealers out there. If you go to the AEV website, I believe you can find an AEV certified dealer there where you can order one of these. If you're not local to Jackson, you can still arrange buying. I live in Florida. We're like opposite ends of the country and we still, made it work. There are many options out there, including picking the vehicle up from AEV itself up at the factory. That was an option that I actually entertained. Logistically, it didn't work out for me, but that would have been really cool to go out there and spend time with the AEV guys and look around. So it starts with the truck build. You start with the truck build it out how you want, and then you work with the, whomever you're buying the Prospector XL from, and you get all the Prospector XL, features and the Prospector XL kit. They've got add-ons. You get all that stuff dialed. What happens is the truck is built at the Ram manufacturing facility, and then it goes from there over to AEV HQ. AEV headquarters, and they do all of the upfitting there, and then it gets shipped from there directly to your dealer, where you take delivery just like you would any other new vehicle. So, can you build one of these on your own? Yeah, sure you can. You can go buy a brand new truck or a used truck or whatever, and you can get all of the PXL, Prospector XL componentry direct from AEV, and you can either do the work yourself or pay somebody else to do it. To my knowledge, this is the reason why I prefer to buy an actual Prospector XL, is because firstly, you get a serial numbered Prospector XL. It's got its own unique identification plaque, and then you've got all sorts of unique AEV branding that you can't get unless it's an actual Prospector XL. So it just depends on what it's worth to you. But the biggest selling point to me in buying an actual PXL versus like a home built one, if you will, is the fact that I know who did this upfitting work, right? I know that the people that did this upfitting work are people that have been doing this for a long time. They're experienced, and like this is what they do every day, day in and day out. AEV has a whole, I don't know how many trucks they can build at one time. I think I've seen pictures of 10 or more being built at one time. So they got a lot of people in there that have been doing this for a long time. I trust them as a company that they're going to do a good job, and I know that when they put this thing together, it's being put together well. To me, that's a huge selling point. I haven't really done many mods to this truck, but the few things that I have done was, like I discussed earlier, the fog light kit from CJC Off-Road. I highly recommend that kit. It's super awesome. I don't know if I'd really call this a mod, but I've got a phone mount from Off-Roam. I think it uses a Peak Design magnetic mount. I highly recommend Off-Roam. They're great. They make great products. I've been really happy with that. I also ran a Goal Zero RV kit, I think it's what it's called, like a wiring kit or something, but it's basically a giant heavy duty cable that goes from the start battery, ran it all the way back to the bed of the truck to plug in and provide power when the vehicle's running to my Goal Zero Yeti 3000X. I guess we can't forget about our Blue Ridge Overland Gear Molly seatback panels and all the pouches. I can't live without those guys. Also, this Velcro radio mount down here, super rad. What are you doing, Razzie? What are you getting into? You trying to find some chips? Huh? All right, I hope this video was of some use to somebody. At the end of the day, I get stopped all the time when I'm driving what we affectionately call the Beast, and they go, what is this? What am I looking at? Like, how did this happen? You know, I get so many people that are curious. So I don't know, maybe this video is going to reach some of those people that have maybe seen these out in the wild and have gone, what is that thing? But hopefully this video is helpful. I don't want it to be redundant. I know I've talked about this truck before, but this is also part of this ongoing process that I have in my head to sort of slowly work myself back into talking to you guys and hanging out with you guys more often. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I know everybody says leave a comment, like, subscribe, all that stuff. I'm guessing the reason that is to try to get more exposure and grow the channel, and maybe more people can find the content that I create. But if you did like this and you feel so inclined to support me, that would be amazing. I would appreciate that. Anyway, with that said, we'll see you guys in the next video.